you damn right. It's time for another House Divided. And before we can even get going, somebody jumps in talking about that hurricane. Blake says, hope you're safe from the hurricane. I'm in Tennessee, where we're getting storms from it now. Blake, we are safe from that hurricane. Jeff Ketchum and his family, at least Jeff Ketchum and part of his family, have moved inland a little bit. His wife is staying back and taking care of some things at the house. They have no power still. That's why we have no Jeff Ketchum today. So they're taking care of their stuff. Hopefully, Jeff will be on from some location tomorrow, possibly a hotel in the Austin area or maybe back at home. We're keeping our fingers crossed on that. And we're keeping our fingers crossed for all of you that are dealing with the hurricane situation. We also had Larry jump in, and just a big thanks, OB. Thank you, Larry, for jumping in today. I'm Chad Hastings, and this guy right here is Wes Miller. Let me see if I can get you the old Scott Hall. That way is where you got to go. At Wes Miller OB, if you want to follow him on Twitter, getting you all that great coverage on OB for basketball and a whole lot more. Wes, how are you, brother?
Doing well, man. How are you?
Man, I am good. We got some recruiting stuff to get into. There is a big conversation going on around Texas recruiting and what's the good news and what's the bad news and what's the potential, news coming and all this kind of stuff. So I think there's some interesting things to get into, and we will do that. Vivek letting us know that they are in the chat. We appreciate you jumping in that Specs chat. Deshaun, good to see you in the, sorry, maybe Deshaun, D-E-S-H-U-N, Deshaun. I kind of like that. And Kyle says it takes a hurricane to get Ketch in Austin. Yes, it does. That's good. I like that one. We hope everybody is safe and sound. I checked in with the father-in-law in Sugarland today. Still no power for him. But he's an old man. You know that what those old men are going to do. They're going to stay at the house. He's going to stay at the house. He's going to deal with the heat, and he's going to ride it out. So hopefully they'll get the power back for him very, very soon. All right. So, Wes, the discussion today, we want Longhorn fans jumping in the Specs chat. The way we kind of framed it today is about the spark in recruiting and when's it coming for Texas. Because I think a lot of Texas fans were thinking that end of June, beginning of July, after the big recruiting weekends, they felt like something was going to be there. You're a fan of this team. Was that your sense of it, that you thought we would get to July 9th and you'd have maybe a five-star story or two to tell?
Oh, yeah. I'm shocked, personally. I know I talked about this a little bit on the modcast. All we heard over the last, 10, 15 years was all Texas, well, not really 15 years. That would have been dating back to the national championship appearance, but let's call it the better half of a decade. That is, if Texas wins, whether that's a conference championship, if they have a college football playoff bid or berth, that we would see waves in recruiting because they were already recruiting well, even when they weren't, performing on the field, right? And so, like a lot of people, I'm pretty surprised for sure.
Yeah, I definitely am too. The idea of what we saw, we didn't see a championship, obviously, but we did see a conference title. We saw a fight in the semifinal. That game certainly was not a blowout by the end of it. And they lost to a damn good football team. If they'd lost to some team nobody respected, maybe that's a discussion. But I thought we'd see more too. And I thought it'd be a good thing today to just kind of keep everybody set really on both sides. We try to be as realistic as we can here on Orange Bloods Live. Y'all know me, right? I'm the realistic Aggie that's willing to do this job, but I'll tell it like it is and like I see it. And I am surprised that Texas is sort of where they are. So as you look at it, here are the numbers to keep in mind. I looked up the Rivals team rankings, and I know how dangerous Ketch tells us that can be. I get it. And it's not the be-all, end-all. But right now, as we sit here, Texas is 32nd in the Rivals rankings. That's just the fact of July 9th. We're recording here on this Tuesday. To give you perspective, Minnesota is right above them at 31. Pitt is right below them at 33. That's where it is. 9 SEC teams are ranked higher than Texas in these team rankings. I'm counting OU, and that includes OU, A&M, Kentucky, and Missouri, and some others that you might not be sort of ashamed of if you're a Texas fan. So that's where it sits right now. So Wes, the interesting thing to me is the push that they got last year, and we'll get into the specifics of that push, but I think fans are a lot of them are predicting it's going to happen. We've gotten a lot of in Sark we trust in the last couple days and the last, all the way back to, I guess, last Thursday night with the DeCorian Moore thing. They are assuming that that push can happen again and take this class from in the 30s all the way up to top 10, top 5 or higher. It feels like a long way to go.
And there might be a push. Who knows? But I think that part of that push will probably not include, at least as it stands today, fresh off a commitment. That push will probably not include DeCorian Moore, Riley Pettyjohn, Lamont Rogers, and the like, right? That push will probably have to occur elsewhere, which is the biggest concern. DeCorian Moore is the highest rated wide receiver prospect, I think, in the state of Texas ever, right? And Texas went all in for DeCorian Moore. They went all in for Riley Pettyjohn from an NIL perspective. So, yeah, there is some concern there. I'm not a huge fan, nor do I really understand that. We'll worry about it in the fall. Like Jason, Alex, and Ketch talked about the other day, you would much rather be in a position like where Oregon is, right? Where you're sitting with a commitment from a DeCorian Moore, and you've locked that. It seems like they've locked that recruitment up. We'll see what happens, down the line. But I'm just not a fan of this whole let's wait until the fall. You look back at some of the commitments they have been able to flip, right? Anthony Hill, Kelvin Banks, you and I talked about this a little bit before the show. Well, Kelvin Banks decommitted from Oregon because Cristobal went to Miami, right? Anthony Hill decommitted from A&M because A&M at the time, program-wise, was kind of a mess, right? There was a lot of instability there. I don't think that anybody would disagree with me when I say that that's probably not going to happen with Oregon, right? Dan Lanning's probably got that head coaching job locked up for as long as he wants to have it, and that team's going to perform on the field. So as far as those recruitments can go or are concerned, I just don't see it happening in terms of a late push. But anything can happen. I get that. Just not a big fan of that.
So we'll talk about that push they got last year here in just a second. But apparently, as we're recording this show, there's some breaking news, and I know Wes is going to be interested because Wes, like a lot of you, is a freak for this college football video game that's coming back, the EA Sports college video game. Jerry's letting us know Manning announced he will be in the game, EA 2025. Somebody else saying Arch is in the game, baby. And also Suave saying Arch had the best announcement to enter EA 25, LOL. So I had not seen this, Wes. Have you seen the announcement from Arch?
No, I've not seen the announcement from Arch. I will tell you, I bet a lot of Texas fans are going to go to the depth chart and just swap QB1 and 2 just because.
That's so wrong. So wrong. By the way, we'll get to it later. It has been announced who's going to SEC Media Days, Texas fans, and your QB1 is going. Your QB2 is not going. Just in case y'all thought maybe Steve Sarkisian was going to get a little squirrely and take both quarterbacks with him to Dallas, that's not happening.
What a nightmare that would have been.
No, you can't do that. No, can't do that. Quinn's going to Dallas for sure. We'll tell you who else is going a little later on. And we're getting already some good chats in. So we'll go positive side first. Doug says, here's the funny part. We seem to be in great position for Fasusi, French, Terry, Lamont Rogers, even though he's one of the guys that just committed, and a pretty special tight end. All but one of these guys is projected a 5-star. Doug, it's a decent point, right?
Are they in a great position with Fasusi and Jamie French and Lamont Rogers? Fasusi right now, it seems like that is teetering on the edge of 50-50, right? Like could go either way. Lamont Rogers just announced his commitment to Missouri. French, according to Ketch, right? Jamie French, yes, announced Texas as his leader a couple months ago, but also Ketch, while he was in Jacksonville with Sukumel, somebody told Ketch, I could see that guy ended up in Miami. Michael Terry's in a recruiting battle with the looming Oregon, for vying for that commitment. And he's from my own backyard here in San Antonio. Who knows, man? It's all over the place.
Yeah, it really is. Doug, it's an interesting point, and it's obviously names that we're keeping an eye on. Then Vivek just throws out this question. I think this is the question on Longhorn fans' mind everywhere if they're honest with themselves. At this point, don't we have to admit Sark is failing to capitalize on our on-field success for recruiting? Vivek, that's the I don't know we're kind of discussing. I don't know if it's fair to say that at this point, but I get why you would. It's July 9th as we record here, and you're thinking you would have seen a little bit more. Wes, as I looked at last year, it was interesting. I thought to myself, okay, I looked at 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars for all the teams that I thought would matter. Texas right now has 8 4-star players. 8. And when I look at the disparity, and I looked up all the teams you would think, 7 other teams: Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, LSU, OU, A&M. So that's who we're talking about. Of all those other teams, the big difference I see, Wes, is 4-star guys. They all have this pile of 4 stars. If I'm a Texas fan, I'm starting to ask the question, is that what my team needs to be doing? Piling up some 4 stars. And it's all of them. Alabama's got 17, Georgia 13, Ohio State 15, Oregon 11, 12 for LSU, 17 for OU, 13 for the Aggies, 8 for Texas. So now I start to go, oh my God, what is going on? But if you want some patience, Texas fans, if you have some, guess how many 4 stars you had last year at this time? It was 8. Same exact number. Leading into the key period of time. The run you made started on August 10th, and it ran through the December signing period, and you got 9 4- and 5-star guys in that time period. And who did it start with, Texas fans? I know you're all raising your hand. You know his name, right? Before I say it, I put him on the thumbnail today for a reason. Colin Simmons. That was August 10th. And as I look at that list, Wes, it didn't even start a huge avalanche on August 10th because the next guy didn't happen until September. Yamuzalo, Brandon Baker, and I understand what I'm saying there because he's no longer with Texas. But then you got Wingo, and then it was Mack and Kobe Black in December, and it all ended up, finishing out that way. So on one hand, if you're a Texas fan, you'll look at that and say, okay, that's the kind of push we can get again. But back to Vivek's point and others, I think, Wes, and kind of what you're bringing up as a fan, based on what we saw on the field, should Texas need an August to December push to get themselves into, forget the top 5, to get themselves into the top 30?
Well, I think that a lot of this plays into the recruiting ideology and methodology that Steve Sarkisian and staff, how they look at recruiting, over across a full recruiting cycle, right? Maybe this is just their preference, but in terms of making fall pushes. But I would be remiss to say that with a Big 12 title and a college football playoff berth, that Texas would be sitting in the mid-30s by July 9th, I would tell you, you are full of crap. There's no way. That's impossible, especially considering at the time, I guess call it mid-June, late June. Mm-hmm. At the time, you were talking about Texas potentially leading for 3, 4 stars, 4 or 5 super blue chips. Like, where did that momentum go? Because it feels like it dissipated.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that because I was looking at those guys too, the certain big names, and we all kind of know the culprits, if you will. Oregon in this, looking up their number right now, they have 2 5 stars, and we all know who one of them is, right? In fact, both of them Texas would take because the other one's the Davison kid at running back. And then LSU took 2 4 stars, one in a flip from Texas, and another guy in Zion Williams they absolutely would have been interested in. Both guys along the defensive, front, and there's obviously a Bo Davis, Brandon Baker discussion maybe to have with that. But that, I think, those are 2 of the culprits to me, Wes, that we've seen in this last run. Because I looked at since July 1st, Georgia's only added 1 4 or 5 star. Bama's added a couple, Ohio State added a couple, but it's not like those big dogs have just put a big swarm on Texas. Mm-hmm. Where you're like, hey guys, we got 6 of them. Where have you been? Texas added 2 4 stars at the DN position and the defensive back, Rogbo and Phillips. But those aren't names so far, Wes, that have really jacked Texas fans up. They want to see a 5-star name. If they want to see a defensive lineman, they want one of these interior studs we've been talking about, or they'd like to see maybe Lance Jackson get another star because they feel like he may deserve that. And then at the skill positions, it's been about more. Yeah. And that was what really took the air out of the balloon is that guy. Because that's the best shot at energy so far I think Texas has had.
I totally agree. And a lot of the chat is, and I can see them coming in right now, is as signing day approaches, let's see what happens. I'm just not a big let's see what happens guy, right? That's the way that I look at this. Erring on the side of caution, I would much rather be in a position like an Oregon where I have that commitment locked up now. I know that per Catch and Sukumel's sources that Texas doesn't like to. They want to play deep. They don't like to play defense. They would rather chase, right? Like that's been their thing. Sark has proven that he deserves the benefit of the doubt. That entire staff does, but there's some extenuating circumstances with the majority of those commitments, right? That Texas has been able to flip over the past couple of years. So, yes, you got a commitment from Smith to Rogbo. You got a commitment from Cade Phillips. But those aren't big names at positions of need right now, right? Yep. So you get Texas is absolutely loaded at the edge spot. The interior of the defensive line has it continued to be a question mark. Let's see what happens with DJ Sanders. Cade Phillips is great, but they have solid depth in the secondary, right, across both defensive back, across all of the defensive back positions. So where you would like to see some progress being made is like a Michael Fasusi, right? You can never have enough offensive line depth. Or a Riley Pettyjohn. Texas is short at linebacker in terms of depth, right? They're thin at linebacker. And Riley Pettyjohn fits not only the physical profile, but scheme-wise, it feels like that guy could fit right into what Pete Kwiatkowski wants to do on defense. So there's just a couple things here and there that are just, top of mind. I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy. I'm just calling it what it is.
Yeah, no, just trying to be realistic with it. And obviously, the Moore decision and then the Pettyjohn decision were big for Texas fans in a negative way. So now you move to that next name, and I think Vivek throws it in. You've thrown it out a couple times. Vivek says if we lose Fasusi, it will truly be time to panic. He's the only guy that can stem the tide and create momentum. Vivek, I'll make an argument for another guy too in a second. But as we're saying that, let's just make sure everybody knows this is the tweet yesterday that Jason Sukumel was referencing on the show and a lot of people are talking about from Fasusi. Big news on Friday. Okay, so that's big if you're a Texas fan. But for Vivek and all those other fans, and I know you're all thinking about Fasusi from what Jason was telling us yesterday and what I believe he is still reporting today, the idea there is it's not going to be an announcement. It's going to be some kind of progress. It might be a updated team list. It might be telling us when it's going to happen, something like that. But it's not going to be the commitment itself. I think that's important to note. But Vivek, I think you're absolutely right. That is one of those guys that can absolutely light the spark. Even though he's an O lineman, we all know how good he is.
Well, not to mention, I don't think that the word panic is appropriate there, right? So here's what you need to think of, right? Fasusi and Decorian Moore and Pettyjohn and the Khalil Lockett's of the world, those are like the crown jewels of the class. If you don't get them, right, there are pieces that you can use to fill those gaps. It's just not going to be, with the super blue chip caliber player, at least from in terms of ranking, that has gone on per Catch's data to prove the players you need to really make a difference. Right? You can still fill that gap, and Texas could still have a top 15, top 10 recruiting class. It's just not going to be with the guys. And I'm not saying Texas will lose Fasusi. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that if they do miss on some of these guys, they don't get them to flip, etc. There are talented kids out there that Texas will be able to recruit and fill some of those gaps. That might end up being, really high-level college players. It's just that you don't get the best wide receiver in the state of Texas from a recruiting profile that's ever existed in every single class, right? Yeah. Decorian Moore is Michael Fasusi, Riley Pettyjohn. Those are special kids. So,
yeah, no doubt.
I don't think it's time to panic, though.
Vivek, thank you for that chat. I think the Fasusi name obviously is one to keep an eye on. Friday, it's the next. So Friday, something happens with Fasusi. Maybe it's a finals list. The idea is that it's Texas, OU, A&M for him. So is that going to go down to just two teams, or is it going to be my announcement will be on this day? We'll keep our eyes peeled for that. Here's the other name I would mention to people, and this is why I brought up last year and Colin Simmons. If Colin Simmons was August 10th, there's a day close to that this year where another big name could go that I think might be able to fill the shoes a little bit, Wes, and it's Khalil Lockett. Mm-hmm. Lockett and French have both said they're going in August. The problem for Texas fans is French is still saying August 30th. That's the day before the first games. So that's a long time in the future. But right around Colin Simmons' time on August the 7th, Khalil Lockett, that's a 5-star too. If he picks Texas on August 7th, I think that could also provide a little bit of a spark, Wes. So I'm watching Fasusi, Lockett, French. If French isn't going to go till late August, it's Fasusi and Lockett, I think, that have the chance to get this thing going.
Yeah, 100%. And something to consider, by the way. I love Khalil Lockett. I love Jamie French. Pivoting back to Decoria Moore real quick, for those of you that think that, Texas might have a part to play in that recruitment ongoing, maybe, right? But something to consider is that Duncanville is probably going to win or play for another state title. As you make deeper runs into the high school playoffs, and makes the visiting window and that window to have, communication with the coaches that much smaller, right? And so that is something to consider moving forward. But yeah, Khalil Lockett's an absolute stud. You can watch the first highlight on his huddle and be like, oh, don't see that very often. So.
Dude, I've been telling people, Wes, if they don't have time, just watch that first one and watch carefully, because it's like an all 22 view. You got to watch it twice to see what he does. That's one of the silliest catches I've ever seen.
It's bananas. He's a very talented kid. Jamie French feels like one of those guys that just no matter what, he's always open, right? Elite route running, elite separation. But Michael Fasusi, according to Alex Dunlap, who had a conversation with the director of recruiting in the SEC, was the best offensive line prospect that he has ever seen. Can't miss on that guy.
Yeah,
right.
No doubt.
You need to lock up that recruitment, and I don't think that A&M is as big of a player in that recruitment as Oklahoma is in terms of who's going to be the biggest threat to Texas. So
a lot of those,
we'll see what happens.
A lot of the early trips for Fasusi was up to Norman instead of anywhere else. That's a good thing to keep in mind. All right, before we move on, and it is house divided today, Wes Miller sitting in for Catch. Catch, once again, without power, had to move the family to somewhere where there is power. Hopefully he'll be with us tomorrow. And again, we're thinking about all of you that are dealing with that. Let's thank one of our great partners, and that is My Perfect Franchise. Every fan hopes they are rooting for the perfect franchise, but maybe you've got that perfect idea. Maybe it's the perfect second idea, or it's the perfect last idea, or maybe it's your first big idea. Whatever it is, Andy can help it become that thing that you need it to be. So contact him. You've got the email there. You've got the phone number. You've got the website, different ways to get in touch with him. myperfectfranchise.net. Make that idea, that side hustle, that job you've always wanted, that project you've always wanted to get involved with. Make it happen and make it the best it can be with My Perfect Franchise. Thanks to Andy for his continued support of orangebloods.com and Orange Bloods Live. All right, Wes, I'll just ask you flat out here, because I know you got another your day job that you may have to pull away from. What timing are we looking at?
Probably soon, to be honest. It's kind of an emergency, so I might need to hop out of here.
We got an emergency situation. Okay, I tell you what, you go ahead and do what you need to do. I appreciate the time, and definitely everybody check out orangebloods.com and at Wes Miller OB for all the basketball stuff. Somebody was asking about basketball recruiting. Go tweet at Wes or go on the boards and ask him at Orange Bloods.
And
he'll tell you all about it.
If I get out a little bit early, I'll make sure to hit you up and I'll hop back in here.
Sounds good, man. All right, I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Wes Miller, ladies and gentlemen, he is ducking out. Got stuff to do. I understand it. Got all kinds of things happening, hurricanes and weather and people moving around. That's why we've got the chat. Some good chats are coming in. Let me check and see if there's been any super chats. Remember, when those come in, they go right to the top of the list. Up over 400 of you in that chat. So, by the way, it was Vivek that asked about basketball recruiting. I'm gonna hold it, Vivek, in case Wes jumps back in. I'm gonna hold it for you there. Vivek threw us that one about Fasusi. Okay, let's get more of this recruiting discussion. Doug says, I feel if we live up to the hype, all pundits are declaring on Austin, I could see next July being way more successful than this year. So that's interesting, Doug. Do you need maybe that? I've been talking about patience in terms of maybe you have to wait till August for another big hit like a Colin Simmons last year. And then maybe it's French and Lockett both in August, which could help you out. But is the real patient discussion about you got to go through a first full year in the SEC? Is that what everybody's waiting on? Like, was it not? It's one of those, were you not entertained, by last year? I'm not saying Texas was the best football team I've ever seen in my life. That's not what I'm saying. But They were pretty damn good. They were fun to watch. Went to Tuscaloosa, won by double digits over Nick Saban. Nobody really does that a lot. And put together a pretty damn good season and dominated in a conference championship game and went to the semifinal. All those things lined up. And I just remember thinking, whoo, recruiting is not going to be hurt on this. And it's not that it's been hurt. I don't know. It just feels like it would be in another spot. After all these years of talking to, Ketch and Sukamel and all these guys that cover it for a living, and to hear their surprise, I think that's the key part of it. So some other thoughts coming in here. Vivek says, we keep saying Sark is going to pull out some magic flips at the end, but we were fortunate with the coaching changes, tanked seasons previously. We can't rely on that. And then Michael responds, agreeing with Vivek. Sark either needs to modify his pitch, get more aggressive, or hope for some luck. So, Michael, to your point, this is why I looked up numbers, because I just wanted to get the comparison. I think all of you would admit, if you're Texas fans, we know you want to recruit better than the rivals, than OU and A&M. That's a flat out. But in terms of the tip top, you want to be on lists with Bama, Georgia, Ohio State. Those are the three big animals that I thought of first. So I would just ask myself this question. If I'm a Texas fan and I could talk to Steve Sarkisian, coach, why is it that Alabama, they're going through a coaching change. Alabama is going through a coaching change that somebody just talks about. Texas took advantage of that last season, right? Okay. 17 4-stars for Alabama right now. 13 for Georgia, 15 for Ohio State. Why? Why is that the case? I know the argument is lay in the weeds, chill out. Texas would rather chase than defend, but can't you do both? Isn't that kind of what the big dogs do? Bama and Georgia and Ohio State. Wouldn't they be able to chase what they need to chase, but they're doing it with a pile of 4-stars behind them? At least that's what I see when I look at the numbers. So I don't know. I really don't know the answer, but we saw it last year. Again, Texas added 3 5-stars and 6 4-stars between August 10th and 3 days before Christmas. That was the time period. They really got after it in that right before the season through through right after the season's over. I guess it's as you're getting ready for the playoff game. This year, it'll be right around, the first round of the playoffs. Just something to keep in mind. And thank you for those chats coming in. We will clean some of those off. And again, if you want to throw in, the a super chat, I will get those. I'm just scanning here to see where we are. Okay, got a couple more on Sark, and we will get those. Also, want to tell you about one of our great partners around here. Whoo, I get hungry every time I think of it. Hayes City Store. I'm not telling you I ate bad on a cruise last week. I did not. I did not eat bad on a cruise, man. They do great stuff on a cruise. But I don't know if they did better stuff than Hayes City Store does. Item in, item out. Appetizer to appetizer, main course to main course, dessert to dessert. Not sure I had anything better. You know what? I had key lime pie. Was it better than Hayes City Store's key lime pie? Nope. It was not. It was not. Just wasn't. Did we have a little chip and dip kind of stuff before? Yes. Yes. Was it Hayes City Store good? Nope. It wasn't. I'm not trying to dog out Royal Caribbean. Royal Caribbean has some food. But I'm telling you, Hayes City Store does as well. They're right out there in Driftwood. They're right out there between Kyle and Wimberley. You go hit them and maybe you can go have some fun in Wimberley like we do. We'll kind of walk around. But trust me, you can just make the trip out there for Hayes City Store, and you're going to want to go back. One of my favorite places to eat on the planet. And Hayes City Store and Taste on Main, they are some of our presenting sponsors for SEC Media Days next week. So big thank you going out to Travis and Tamara and the crew. Get on out to Hayes City Store. There's your QR code. Tell them we sent you out there from Orange Bloods Live. They are a proud supporter of ours, and they have been for a while now. Thanks so much for that. And get on out to Hayes City Store. All right, look at here. Look at here. My man's got a real job taking care of stuff, and now he's back in. Look at you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I had to take a quick phone call, put out a fire, and fire's been put out. It's been extinguished. So
Look at you. Nice enough to come back. That tells me you at least somewhat enjoy having conversations with me. You could have just run
hey,
away
man,
and said, I got a lot of hard work to do. So
there aren't a lot of better people to talk to, man. I love having conversations with Chad Hastings.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. All right. So you know what? I said I was going to get to it and save it, and then I got rid of it. So where did it go? Hang on, hold on. I got it for you. I know I got it for you. There it is. Before we move any further, how is basketball recruiting looking? Because Vivek wanted to know earlier.
Over with. Roster's full. No more scholarships available. Rodney, Terry, and staff have loaded that puppy up. Guys, I cannot stress to you more than I am today, and more than what I've already written about on orangebloods.com. Texas is going to be really good next year. It's not just me who's thinking it. I know Lunardi has them at a 3 or 4 seed right now. I'm telling you that roster is going to be good. If they're not, time to look at Rodney Terry in the face and ask what's going on behind the scenes, because that roster from a talent perspective looks really, really good. I'm not saying they're a national championship team, but I would say that a no Sweet 16 appearance would be a disappointment for sure.
Okay, there you go. And by the way, I think Doug agrees with you. Fired up for Longhorn basketball. Should be a solid season. Real quick, Wes, the last guy that they put on the roster. Tell me, it was while I was on the trip. Tell me about him.
Arthur Kaluma. He was a forward from Kansas State. It's funny. He's only a sophomore, but it feels like he's been around for forever for some reason. He's about 6'8". Has really good ball skills for someone at that size. Kind of a tweener in terms of what his physical profile would look like in NBA comparisons. But super good energy guy, talented defender. Always seems like that he plays well, especially when he plays Texas. So it's nice to get one of those guys from a Kansas State or from like a TCU, one of those guys that always feels like they fill it up against the Horns to come back home to Austin. But it's also a position of need, right? So Texas's depth in the front court has been somewhat concerning. And when Caden Shedrick comes out of the game,